Hello, my name is Gerhard Adam, and in this series of modules we will explore the Job Control Language, or JCL. In particular, what we're going to be doing is that we're going to learn about the Job Control Language and how it is used in ZOS environments in order to facilitate unattended operations. In other words, the ability to run work without somebody having to specifically intervene with its running. So in this particular module, we will take a look at a quick overview of what JCL is all about. Before we begin though, you need to ensure that you have completed the Introduction to the Mainframe and the Introduction to the TSO ISPF Environment modules. The reason being is that many of the concepts that are introduced into those sections are going to be referred to and are going to be used here in order to establish the basis for using JCL. So ensure that you have completed those modules and that you have a fair understanding of what's taking place before you try to proceed into the JCL segment itself. JCL, in general, the job control language, is nothing more than a kind of scripting language. Now that may be a little misleading because of the fact that we don't employ logic and it's not programming, but it is a language in the sense that what it allows us to do is it allows us to identify the resources that are going to be used by a particular program that we want to run. And as I just mentioned, it is used for unattended operations, meaning that if we have work that we need to run and either we can't be there or we have certain requirements that the program is using in terms of multiple input sources or output requirements and things like that, then it may not be practical to run some of this type of work with manual intervention. And so as a result, JCL is used then to describe the resources that are used in order to be able to get a unit of work to run. So one of the very first things that we have in JCL is, of course, identifying the unit of work. When we talk about identifying the unit of work, that means that we have to identify something that is running on the system that the originator of that work is maybe not around, or it certainly can't be related directly back to them. So for example, they may be logged into a session and they may be performing various actions, but when they submit a job to run, that job runs as a separate independent unit of work. Computer operators need to be able to identify the work that is running on the system, as well as seeing when it begins and when it ends, or in the event of a problem, if they have to cancel that particular unit of work. So identifying a unit of work is fundamental in being able to run background tasks, and one of the functions of JCL is to provide that identification. In addition, JCL is going to identify the program that we intend to run. We may have one program in a step of the JCL, or we may have multiple steps involving multiple programs that are going to be run in sequence. And as a result, we can perform various actions, we can pass data between steps, and we can create a whole series of events that are taking place then of where we have one program functioning, passing information to a second program, passing information onto a third program, and as a result, we can have an entire process laid out that can be done unattended. In addition, the JCL is going to establish the input and output requirements for each step that we run. So that means whatever the program is depending on for input data, as well as what the expectation is for output that is being produced, will be defined through our JCL. So first, let's take a quick look at some basic syntax rules. JCL syntax is all based on the 80-byte card image. And so in the identification field, in position 1, we identify a JCL statement as containing 2 slashes. And that is the basis by which we recognize a JCL statement. Without the 2 slashes, any information is going to be simply interpreted as data. And as a result, depending on where it's placed or depending on how it's being used, would likely result in a syntax error or an erroneous interpretation of the information that's being presented to the system. We may have a name field that follows immediately after the identification field. In these situations, if we have a need to reference or to potentially identify a particular step or a particular job, then we need to have the name field filled in. And this immediately follows the identification field. The operation field follows after that, identifying what type of JCL statement we are dealing with. Parameter fields are going to be entered then, and these parameter fields represent the values that we want associated with a particular JCL statement. Parameters can be coded on a statement, but they cannot extend beyond column 71 of this card image format. In the event that you have more values that need to be entered, they can be continued onto a second line, and they end with a comma on the first statement and then continue prior to position 17 on the subsequent statements. So all continued JCL statements must begin before column 17 on any continuation. As we said, the JCL statements themselves are 80-byte card images, and as a result, we find that some of the rules that are associated with JCL coding go back to the time when cards were in fact actually used. So the rule, for example, of nothing extending beyond column 71 is based on the idea that 72 through 80 were reserved for sequence numbers in card decks. Each JCL statement then consists of 5 fields, where we have an identification field beginning in position 1, followed immediately by a name field. And this label or name is going to be the basis by which we reference that particular statement. And again, this cannot have any spaces between the identification and the label fields. Following the operation field then, this will identify the particular type of statement that we have, and then the parameters that are going to be associated with the values. And then after the first space is encountered, anything after that will be considered a comment. So the general format of the JCL statement is going to look something like this. We have a / identifying it as a JCL statement. We have the name field immediately following that. We have a space. Then we have the operation field identifying the type of JCL statement that it is. Then we have another space, and then we have a series of positional and or keyword parameters that will be coded that convey the values that we want for that particular statement. As we said, these parameters can be coded then up to column 71, in which case continuation then would allow us to create a JCL statement that begins prior to column 17, where we continue adding parameters.